Why do we have bad habits? Why do we do things that waste our time and then make us feel guilty afterwards? What causes bad habits? As it turns out, most bad habits come from two sources: boredom and stress. Whether it's binge watching late at night, spending too much money, or eating too much junk food, a lot of it comes down to stress and boredom. The following is a breakdown of how to break bad habits, and it's based on the work of James Clear, the New York Times bestselling author of the book Atomic Habits. So James Clear breaks down the process into 4 steps. So we have a cue, which leads to a craving, which leads to a response, which leads to a reward. Oh my. And the reward reinforces and becomes associated with the cue. And you see, this forms a feedback loop, and we need to get into the habit of realizing what each of these things are for our bad habit. An example of a cue would be you feel stuck on an assignment or something and you lack motivation, and being stuck makes you feel frustrated or agitated. Feeling that way makes you crave relief, and the response is that you take out your phone and you go through social media, whether it's YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, or if you're 16, TikTok. And the reward is that you feel satisfied and you don't feel agitated anymore. So now the reward, checking social media, is associated with the cue, which is feeling bored or stuck while doing an assignment. And it's also not a coincidence that when you're agitated, you turn to social media and it satisfies you to an extent. I personally am convinced that they have researchers and behavioral scientists working for them so that they exploit our dopamine pathways and make us use their product over and over again, but that's a topic for another time. So James Clear mentions that this 4-step process impacts us constantly and continuously. It's like a feedback loop that goes on and on, like that, something that's affecting us even now. Our brain scans the environment, predicts what's going to happen, tries out different responses, and learns from the results in split seconds. And this happens again and again throughout the day. I mean, if you know anything about psychology, this is basically conditioning from the work of Skinner and Pavlov and Watson. So how do we break this cycle and how do we keep it that way? So James Clear mentions that if we invert these 4 laws, namely the cue, the craving, the reward, and the response, if we invert them, if we kind of like do the opposite, then that's the key. So let me put this into perspective. If a cue is obvious and visible, if your phone is right next to you, it's like 2 feet away from you, and it vibrates. If the craving is attractive, so if you're tired of studying and you're getting bored and you want to relieve that, and if the response is easy and accessible, the phone is right there, all you have to do is reach out and pick it up. If the reward is satisfying, so you pick up your phone and you text somebody or you use it and you relieve you relieve the boredom to an extent. If all of these conditions are true, a visible cue, an attractive craving, an accessible and easy response, and a satisfying reward, then chances are you're not going to be able to break this habit quite easily. Habit will be strengthened. Now, on the flip side, if the cue is invisible, for example, your phone is not even in the room and it's on silent, if the craving is undesirable or unattractive in some way, that'll obviously make you less likely to want to pursue it. I don't know how you'd apply that to the example that I just gave you. And if the response is difficult and hard to access, so for example, your phone is on the fridge, and that would mean you'd have to get up and leave your room and go get your phone, and maybe you're feeling lazy and you don't want to do that, so that makes it difficult to access compared to when it's right there and you just have to reach and pick it up. And if the reward is unsatisfying, so let's say you convince yourself that, you know, using my phone while studying is a bad thing, like I waste time, I don't focus, and you pair that regret and disappointment with the reward, you're less likely to see the reward as satisfying. So if all of these are true, if the cue is invisible, if the craving is undesirable, if the response is difficult and hard to access, and if the reward is unsatisfying, chances are that habit will be less desirable and it'll be easier to change. So before we move on to more tips, I just want to remind you guys that a maxim or like a law of psychology is basically that you can't just get rid of a thought or a behavior completely. Like you can't just force it away and like expect it to, you know, spontaneously combust. If you want to decrease a behavior or a thought, and this is something I referenced in the ruminating video, so be sure to check that out as well. But if you want to do that, you have to replace that behavior or that thought with something else, because your habits are in your life to try to meet some of your needs. You just need to find a healthier alternative to meet your needs. James Clear mentions that one way to break a bad habit is to choose a substitute. This means that you'll have to think in advance about a situation that'll either cause you stress or boredom, and you have to think about how you're going to react to that situation. So for example, what will you do when you get the urge to smoke? You, instead of smoking, you can do breathing exercises. What about when you want to watch one more episode of The Office at midnight and you have an exam at 8 a.m. tomorrow? So instead of clicking and watching that next episode, you close your device, either your laptop or your phone, you put it away and you go brush your teeth, and then you start pairing brushing your teeth with going to bed. So the point is to develop a plan for what you're going to do when you're faced with the urge to do your bad habit, to have a substitute ready for when you feel that way. The next point is really similar to finding out what your cue is, making it invisible. So you're going to find out what your triggers are and to cut them out or reduce them as much as possible. So James Clear gives the example that if you eat cookies when they're in your house, then get rid of them and don't buy them and bring them to your house. If you watch unholy things on your laptop or your phone when nobody's around, then stop being alone. Don't sit alone in your room. Use your laptop or your phone on the living room couch. So James Clear suggests tracking how many times in a day that your bad habit happens. And he says to do this, you just need a slip of paper and a pen or something to write with. So throughout the day, you're going to tally each time you do your bad habit. And at the end of the day, you're going to get a total for how many times you've done that habit. And the point isn't to beat yourself up that you've eaten cookies 12 times yesterday, but the goal is to recognize how often your bad habit occurs and when it occurs. Because if you recognize the environment in which it occurs, the frequency and the cues, then you're that much closer to breaking the habit and changing that environment. And I want you guys to remember that breaking a habit is a commitment, and most people fail many times before they actually succeed. And I can attest to that. So invest in yourself and persevere. And I hope the advice was clear. And be sure to check the description box for useful links and other books that are related to the psychology of habit formation. And mind you, these are New York Times bestselling books. So thank you so much for watching today's video. And if you enjoyed, then show it some support with thumbs up and by sharing it with your friends. And consider subscribing because I upload every week. And yeah, see you guys in the next one.